Hey everyone. So if you've seen the Game Changers documentary, then you'll know this man's story. Originally a UFC fighter and martial artist, while injured, he started looking for ways to help his body recover and stumbled across the virtues of a plant-based diet. Many hours of study later, he put out the Game Changers documentary, which looked at the athletic performance benefits a plant-based diet can provide, and was executive produced by the likes of Arnie, James Cameron, and Lewis Hamilton. Here to discuss the aftermath of that documentary, as well as dispel some of the myths surrounding plant-based eating, is James Wilks. So James, let me start by asking you, how are you, where are you, and how have you been dealing with the current situation?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. Hope you're doing well as well. I'm in Orange County, California. It's been a challenge. I think it's been more challenging for my wife than anything else, doing the homeschooling with the kids and everything. But yeah, it's been an interesting time. I feel very fortunate that, I've got exercise equipment. I've got mats in my gym, so I can still work out. I've got a 350-pound tire and a sledgehammer, so I can flip that on the street and stay in shape. So that's something I'm really thankful for. And then just thankful that the kids are healthy and the family's safe.
You're a black belt in about three different martial arts. Is that correct?
I think, well, it depends. Black belt or equivalent. I think it's 5. Yeah.
Have you just had to give all that up for the minute, or you're not able to?
Well, actually, my wife has become my training partner, somewhat against her will. So she's actually getting really good very quickly and picking it up. It's funny, for years she would do a little bit here and there, like hitting the pads with me, but we'd never put on the gloves and sparred and got on the ground and done jujitsu and stuff like that. So that's basically what's ended up happening. So I think she's enjoying some of it, but I have to sort of push her a little bit to get out in the garage.
Let's get into your documentary then. So the Game Changers came out roughly 2 years ago now. Were you surprised by the impact that it had, and how do you feel about the amount of people who've made changes to their diet because of it?
The response has been incredible. I mean, according to many metrics on Google Trends, the interest in plant-based eating more than tripled worldwide when the film hit Netflix, within a week of hitting Netflix. So the response has just been overwhelmingly positive. Of course, you've got, some of the naysayers, either that are sponsored by the meat industry or that are just emotionally attached to their meat eating, or they profit from selling books about meat or whatever. And there's people that are just going to be skeptical, which is great. But overwhelmingly, it's been very positive from all walks of life. I get firefighters, soldiers, elite athletes. Like we've got Olympic gold medalists writing us, just top people in NBA, UFC, writing us all the time, looking for advice on transitioning over. So it's been great.
You mentioned the naysayers there. I mean, when it came out, it was quite a divisive documentary as well. Were you kind of prepared for that and prepared for the kind of the onslaught almost that came at you?
Yeah, I mean, we knew there was going to be a lot of pushback. And actually, in the demographic, like especially young guys that sort of go to the gym, there was actually less pushback than we expected. So certainly, you've got these small pockets here or there of people trying to debunk it, which no one's done, I think, a good job of at all. Yeah, we expected there's going to be pushback. People are very attached to their meat eating, and people actually. It's based on sort of behavioral psychology. People, especially young men, they feel, I've got to be tough. Meat eating is sort of tied to that. So it's hard to overcome those barriers. Information alone isn't actually enough to overcome those barriers. And people really want to push back. If they've been doing it their whole lives, they've been sort of led to believe this. They don't want to feel like they've been tricked. So, yeah, there was some pushback, but I think overwhelmingly there's been a positive response.
Can we just discuss the kind of Joe Rogan podcast interview a little bit as well? How was that? How was kind of having to defend your corner so staunchly in that interview? How did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I approached it in the best way. I was probably a little bit emotional to start with. I spent 7 years making the film, right? And then Chris Kresser said he spent, before he did the first debunk video, which was 3 hours on Joe Rogan before we debated, he said he spent 7 hours taking it apart. So I spent 7 years, and he thinks in 7 hours he can come up with a bunch of arguments against it. And he did a terrible job, honestly. Like, I could have done a better job trying to pick holes in it myself. than he did. So he picked very weak arguments. I mean, the science in the film is very strong. We have some of the world's leading, nutrition scientists in the film. And he just did a poor job. I don't think that, my first hour wasn't great on the Joe Rogan podcast, but I think I came away and even Joe realized, Joe at one point says, I don't think you've lost an argument yet. So, but you see in the comments, people sort of talking smack on the way that I approached it, and I was a bit aggressive, but you really can't win, right? Like if I was like gentle and calm, people would say, oh, see, if you're on a vegan or a plant-based diet, it makes you soft and weak, and then if you come in like aggressive, a bit like a fighter, which I am, vegans are aggressive, you just can't win. People are going to try and pick you apart, whatever you do.
Have you gone through the comments of that?
I've definitely read some of them. Some of them.
Do you have any favorites? I'll tell you mine.
Yeah, okay, let me hear it.
This guy's not a vegan, he's a carnivore. He ate that guy alive.
Yeah, there's a couple like that where it's like James looks like the meat eater and Chris Kresser looks like the stereotypical vegan, Because, I mean, I never attacked his sort of appearance personally, and I think people shouldn't have been doing that, but people were sort of pointing out that he looked gaunt and sort of pale. I mean, I don't think that's not a good way to scientifically analyze something, and it's not something that I would personally go after. I did see a lot of comments about that, which I think is a shame. But I just don't think he had any strong arguments. I think and it's a shame that it didn't go longer, honestly, because there were so many things. I only covered about 20% of the things that I wanted to cover. And at the end, people saying, oh, well, you still didn't say why meat was bad. Well, they must have missed the thing about heme iron where Chris was completely wrong. In fact, there's actually been a review of that article since. Even though I was right about what I was saying, there's been a review, and the authors of that article about the heme iron have made corrections because they made mistakes, which I pointed out on the podcast. So they've actually gone and, in the peer-reviewed literature, they've gone and made corrections to the paper. So.
Is Joe Rogan, is he your kind of favorite person that you've kind of changed their opinion with your documentary, or do you have another person that you kind of point to?
I mean, I don't know how much I changed his opinion. I think I definitely swayed him somewhat, but then, he gets on the phone with other people and they say, oh, James is just good at talking or whatever. And I think he's, swayed back. I mean, that month in January, he went carnivore for a month to try that. I mean, I'd hope he'd now go and give a plant-based diet a try for a month as well and see how he feels. And I think people, as well as just sort of seeing how you feel, I mean, there's some studies showing that people on keto diets feel like they're improving in their athletic performance, but based on measures, they're actually not. They're actually doing worse. So I think it'd be important for someone like Joe to go and get a blood test and actually measure some metrics, like, how fast can you run this? How many pull-ups can you do in this? To get some metrics going. And go on a plant-based diet for a month or two, and then actually test those things rather than just sort of anecdotally say, oh yeah, I felt a bit better, I felt a bit worse,
So a couple of years after release, then a year about after the kind of the larger release, has people's reaction to you changed? Has people's reaction to the movie changed?
I think. I'm not really sure. I mean, before this lockdown, right, people were coming up to me. Literally, I couldn't go anywhere without people coming up to me, whether it was a grocery store, a Home Depot, on an airplane. It was just crazy. I mean, the amount of people, I mean, by most metrics that we can tell, we haven't got an exact lock on it yet, but it appears to be the most viewed documentary of all time. And then just people coming up to me, overwhelming. Of course, it's a bit of a confirmation bias because the people that didn't like it probably see me and then don't come up and say anything, right? Because they're out there fine, like these armchair warriors sitting behind their computers talking trash on the internet, but people don't want to come up and say it to your face. But it's overwhelming on a daily basis. Anywhere I would go before this lockdown, before this quarantine, people would come up saying, man, I switched. I've got off my diabetes medication. Oh man, I switched. I've lost all this diet. Our whole family switched. We're feeling better. And I get so many hundreds and hundreds of messages, on a weekly basis, people saying, I'm feeling so much better. I've lost all this weight. I've got off this medication. And just, so I think it's, attitude towards me seems to be positive, but again, you're always going to get those naysayers.
What is it like to be James Wilks in a grocery store? Is it is it just carnage? People going up to you talking about what you're buying?
It was. I mean, I haven't really been much. We've been getting most stuff delivered since the lockdown, but before that, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And of course, people come up to me. I'm just trying to get a grocery shop done. People come up, thanking me, and then start asking me questions like, "Well, what about recipes and what?" It's hard to. And I want to sort of, help everyone one-on-one, but I just don't have that much time. But it was a little bit crazy there for a few months before the lockdown.
Looking at the kind of the wider scale, then, do you think that we're on the kind of precipice of a major cultural change with plant-based diets, or do you ever worry that it's a kind of big excitement at first and then that excitement will wane?
No, I think it's very clear from the data. I mean, plant-based sales are growing 500% compared to food sales in general. I mean, it's just, I think, for so many reasons, people are realizing from the health, for example, since the film was finished, Imperial College in London did a review of all the new studies and the meta-analyses. And it showed again that, like, in terms of reduction of heart disease, cancer, premature death, there was an increased benefit to eating more plants across fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts. And then there's even more data coming out just very recently showing endurance, improved endurance for those people. It was a study on women, and the people that were on plant-based diet had improved endurance compared to those on meat and dairy. And that was measured through VO2 max. So I think there's continuing science from the health and performance aspects, and then of course from the environmental aspects in the planet. And then with this lockdown, with COVID-19, we know that the root of this is from animals. I mean, you look at the swine flu, the bird flu, all these pandemics, 3 out of 4, I believe it is, start because of animals, whether that's wild animals or whether that's, domesticated animals, farm animals. And then the funny thing is, people say, oh, well, we don't want to spread disease, so we should separate and, have this social distancing. Well, what are we doing to animals that are in, in factory farms? What conditions are they in? So it's no wonder that disease is spreading, amongst those animals, and then it transfers over to humans. So there's another reason for public health that we should be switching to more plants.
One question that I always wonder from the film is that if there are so many benefits from a performance perspective from a plant-based diet, why is it the kind of athletes and sports teams that haven't kind of widely taken up plant-based diets? And is that something that you would expect to come in the next couple of years, the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changing. I mean, we had a request at FC Barcelona. There's Messi is plant-based during the season. There's a few other people there that are heavily plant-based, if not vegan. And a lot of people don't talk about it, right? They don't really, it's sort of, it used to be a stigma. It's not so much anymore. And some people don't want to give away their competitive advantage. But I think in terms of wide adoption, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think we're in this system, right? Well, there's all this marketing, and just like when doctors were still smoking and saying it was fine, if a doctor smokes himself, right, back in the 50s, and there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that's going on. So despite the data coming out, if you're a smoker yourself, are you really going to believe that smoking is bad and want to tell your patients not to smoke? So I think it's the same thing. So one, there's the marketing, and doctors and dietitians and so forth, their brains are still susceptible to the marketing, right? It's not like because you become a dietitian, you're no longer susceptible to the meat industry's marketing. On top of that, the industry influence, you've got to remember these dietitians that work for a lot of the teams, that they've gone through a system, for example, in America, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, where it's been heavily influenced by industry. So their education has not been, fully based on science. So, but I think things are changing. I think some of these dietitians are opening their mind up, looking more at the data directly themselves, and not just taking the education that they got. And I do think, and it does seem that things are changing. I mean, there's teams that we've been talking with that are very interested at very high levels, that want to do screenings with us. They want to do panels. They want us to weigh in. And there's hundreds of very elite athletes that have reached out to us. We can't really mention those names based on the HIPAA Act, because it's basically a healthcare situation in a way. But some of the top names that you can think of in basketball, soccer, football as well, and then Olympic swimming, gymnastics. I mean, so many different sports of these athletes reaching out to us. So I do think things are changing. I
was going to ask that, is there a kind of sport that you would say is at the forefront of this that's really moving fast with this?
I think soccer is one of the big ones. There seems to be a lot of soccer players switching over. And I think there's actually a documentary out there about plant-based eating in soccer that's come out, or is coming out. But yeah, it seems like there's definitely some big articles out there if you search on soccer. I think we posted one actually recently on Game Changer social media as well. People can check out. We're linking to a third-party article, and it does seem that soccer seems to be shifting in that direction more.
I actually read a sports nutritionist over here who works with different soccer clubs, football clubs, whatever, saying that the kind of ideal diet would be vegan plus meat. So kind of you'll get your plant base with kind of the benefits of meat too, or a little bit of meat on the side. Is that something that you kind of not necessarily agree with, but something that you could kind of support and get on board with?
Yeah, well, I think when he says that, when he says vegan, he probably means like whole plant foods, right? Because again, you can have a vegan diet that's very unhealthy. You could be eating French fries every day, soda every day. There's a bunch of vegan cookies, right? So when people are saying, yeah, you can eat mostly vegan, they probably mean, if they're talking about health and performance, they're probably saying get most of your calories from plants and then still eat a bit of meat. Now, sure, I think that would be a big improvement for most people. A lot of people's diet is processed junk food, like processed plant foods, tons of oil, white flour, white sugar, where it's processed and extracted. That's not what we're talking about here. So yeah, I would encourage if people can switch to eating mostly whole plant foods, and then they want to still have a bit of meat or a bit of eggs. I remember we did a screening, and someone said, we did a Q&A panel afterwards. Someone says, yeah, but I couldn't go vegan because I have once a month we go out with the boys and we have sushi. It's like a get together. I'm like, well, so he says, so what do I do? Well, do that then. You know what I mean? Don't let that stop you from making changes elsewhere. Like if you want to shift towards more plant-based eating, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And yeah, I would certainly say for a lot of people, maybe that's as far as they want to take it. They want to switch to more whole plant foods, get rid of some of the sugar and the white processed, and then on the, cut down on the meat consumption, have it a little bit less often, and have smaller portions. But people, we're not trying to tell people what to do. I'm just like, I think the science is out there. Sure, the difference between 95% plant-based and 100% plant-based may not be that different, right, in terms of health, or even 90 to 100. But certainly we know that the more plant foods you can incorporate, the better you seem to do.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that even though you eat a fully plant-based diet, you're not anti-meat in any way, shape or form. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm anti-meat in the same way that I'm anti-white sugar or I'm anti-white flour. I mean, I think there's more problems with animal products. And I do think there's different qualities of animal products, right? So I think that if you can have wild caught deer, or in Australia, there's a study on it that I mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast. There's studies looking at 3 inflammatory mediators. It was like CRP, interleukin-6, and TNF alpha, 3 inflammatory mediators. And they compared beef to kangaroo meat. And the kangaroo meat had about half the inflammation. The inflammatory markers were half as much as they were with the beef. So I certainly think, because inflammation is sort of a core underlying factor of both optimal athletic performance and also cancer, heart disease, and so forth, right? So if you're going to choose the meat, I think you should be careful what you're choosing. I certainly don't think from factory farms, which is the meat that most people are eating, is good. I don't think that meat is good in general. There was still inflammation being caused by that meat, but you could have less. I just don't think that if you're getting enough calories and you're eating a diverse range of plant foods, I don't think there's any benefit to incorporating any animal foods, right? So in terms of a scientific point of view. And I think, in fact, by excluding that animal product and having more plant foods, I think there's a double benefit. I think there's problems with the animal foods inherently, regardless of whether they've had antibiotics and hormones and whether they're in a factory farm. I certainly think you can have less bad animal products and you can have it less. I'm not against someone eating whatever they want to eat, but I don't think that that's a diet that I would advocate. I would advocate just switching, get as many whole plant foods in your diet as possible, basically.
In your current job then as the combatives trainer, do you wear two hats and go in there and kind of talk about plant-based diets as well? I know the military taking on board plant-based diets.
So the military has probably took the biggest interest out of any type of group, of anyone. I mean, so we had a lot of interest from sort of Fortune 100 companies. We did screenings at WeWork and Bloomberg and Facebook and Google. And there's that real shift there because they realize that if people have more energy and they feel better, that they're going to be more productive at work. Also, many of these companies, you know, like Whole Foods, for example, they are self-insured, right? And so what do they do with their sickest associates, the employees that work for them, right? They send them for free, they pay them, and they send them on a week-long plant-based retreat. That's what they do, because they know that if they go on the plant-based diet, they're reducing their risk of chronic disease. And so they can get off their expensive medication often. They can, they don't have to go in to have that heart surgery. So it's saving them money. So these large companies, they're not stupid. They're going to follow the science, right? They're going to have more productive employees and more, and less risk of disease and therefore lower costs, right? Like Starbucks, for example, spends more on healthcare than it spends on coffee beans. So that's been a big sector, but the military has been even more interested. I mean, the film was the first documentary ever to be accredited by the DHA. So healthcare members could get certified medical education credits, CMEs, by watching the film and listening to a panel that we gave. And then from that, you know, the Special Operations Medical Association endorsed the film and plant-based eating. And then from there, it sort of spread into the sort of the public sphere with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine giving CMEs for watching the film and taking a quiz that he developed. But that started really with the military offering that. And I definitely think there's a significant interest in the military in getting their troops healthier. A lot of people in the military are overweight. They're looking for, you know, optimal performance, you know, sort of making their fighters more efficient. So the military does seem to have taken a big interest. Now, again, in the same way in the public sphere, you've got your naysayers, right, coming out. Some military dietitians saying, no, we think this is all propaganda or whatever they want to say. But overwhelmingly, there's been a positive response from the military. And we did screenings at a number of bases, panels. It was very well received within the military.
Okay, so a couple of final questions then. So yeah. With my research, am I correct in saying that you like magic or you practice magic?
Yeah.
Is that right?
I like magic, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't practice much anymore because, like, who are you going to show, you know? And once you're showing your buddies and there's, like, no one to show anymore. But, yeah, yeah.
Okay, we'll do a little tenuous link here then. So if there was one aspect of the meat industry or one objection to plant-based eating that you could make disappear, what would that be?
Oh, I think I would try to get rid of the sort of the concept that meat isn't normal, natural, and necessary, right? Because I think that's at the core of it. People think that it is a normal part of the diet, a natural part of the diet, and a necessary part of the diet. And I think that's just completely backwards thinking. It's super inefficient. It's bad, you know, for health. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for athletic performance. If people didn't think that, you know, and a tier on that is like, if you really think that you need meat to build muscle, I mean, it's so old-fashioned thinking. I mean, there's so many people out there. I mean, so many people I just follow personally on Instagram. I know it's anecdotal, but like hundreds of guys that are just jacked and ripped and like put muscle on when they went plant-based, not just maintained it, you know? So there's so much science, like the science and the anecdotal stuff just proves like it's not normal, natural, and necessary, and it's not necessary to build muscle either.
After Game Changers then, what's next for you, and how are you planning to keep plant-based eating at the forefront of people's minds?
Yeah, well, what we've continued to do is we've sort of, we've been consulting for elite athletes, and some teams have been talking to us through Game Changers. There's something that we're working on now that we're hopefully announcing soon about sort of an organization that we're putting out there to really help people shift. Again, not pushing veganism, but providing access and promoting plant-based eating, just getting people, you know, like in a lot of areas, you can't even get access to good fruits and vegetables, right? So again, it's not pushing the vegan messages, it's just giving people, promoting plant-based eating, getting people eating more plants, but also helping provide access. So we're about to launch something here fairly soon, sort of an organization promoting that. But yeah, that's my thing now. I mean, I was doing the training before the lockdown. somewhat with the military and that sort of thing still, but I really want to help millions of people. So I want to, help a shift, keep that shift going towards more plant-based eating.
Okay, yeah, we'll look out for that organization. Hopefully you'll see that on Men's Health at some point. Thanks for joining us for a FaceTime, James. That's James Wilks, everyone.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me.